Hmm. Yeah, all that's hooked up like it's supposed to. There we go. Yep, there we are. We're just waiting on them at this point. We're on the wait and see list here. So while we're waiting, go take a tour around. Nope, nope, not gonna do that. Not taking the bait. So what's everybody excited for? Because based on all the stuff that I've kind of been led to believe, it's all new rules. All new rules coming up. Hello there. Uh, kinda. I'm putting my thoughts with it as we go. About 7 minutes or so. I don't like doing stuff like this, but uh, too too many too many heads up not to. And the fact that we don't have a rules page at the moment, as such. Boom. Just go there. And then we go Star Wars Legion, rules and organized play. Sorry, this page don't exist. So, you know, since I'm doing more and more content nowadays, it might as well go ahead and knock this one out while I'm at it. But we're going to leave that page up because, we know that it's going to oh oh wait, home, products, transmissions, rules and organized play. We still get X-Wing rules? Yeah, we still have X-Wing rules. Dead game. Dead game. Oh wait. Uh, God, as much as this is the way fits, it really shouldn't. Not looking. I'm hoping that these rule changes ain't enough to kill the community. Like, new game each week with Prime. Oh, okay. So I got some new games to go download in Prime real quick. We'll go get them while we're waiting. So, what's your predictions on changes? So I just finished up painting a bunch of Ewoks and stuff, and now they're going to tell me that they're banned. That would be my luck. Ewoks OP, Ewoks banned. That wouldn't be surprising. But that looks interesting. So soon we'll be live. 3 minutes away ish. Hello there. Yeah, you can watch this in the background, Newgate. I have a funny feeling this goes over all the new rules we're about to get, so be fully prepared. And the reason why I say that is you go over here to rules and organized play, and the page don't exist. Broken links. And if you was tuned in for right off the rip this morning, the banhammer was very wild on Twitch. You know, I'm about removing toxicity from the community. I'm not about banning them because they said something about a game that's now currently dead. And it don't make it no fun. But, you know, we're going to have a little bit of fun while we're at it today. Might as well. We're going to do this, and then I think I'm going to take a brief break for dinner, and I'll be back for a couple hours this evening. We'll be painting stuff, and why not talking about rules? Since that's going to be the hot topic of the day, I can already tell. Have a good one, and yeah, can't blame you. Um, Looks like we just went live.
With our wonderful playtesters and internally to effectively create a new refresh, not a new edition. This is very much the original Legion that we all know and love, but it has been dramatically affected and rebalanced. We're going to be talking about a brand new battle deck and changing the way in which missions work in order to bring more interactivity, more excitement to the gameplay itself. We're going to be talking about a massive rebalance. So a while ago, we announced and showed off the fact that we are going to be redoing all of the soft plastic miniatures into hard plastic. As part of that, of course, it gave us the chance to go in and start to look at all of the original units that were made for the game, as in addition to everything holistically as where we are now, where we're going with new development. And we're doing a massive rebalance for that. So effectively, we're going to go through the first half of this process. And that's going to be the important bit to know is that today is one part of it. The second part of it, the full completion of this entire refresh, is going to be finished out around this time next year.
Oh.
So we're going to be talking a bit more about part 2 come Adepticon and its roadmap in 2025, showing you more of what to expect. But the whole culmination is effectively going to be that you're going to get a brand new refreshed Legion that has updated rules, an updated look, everything else going on, with everything going forward and set up for the success of the next 5 to 10 years. And we're going to continue to, of course, iterate and build on the foundation. But this is kind of the big moment where doing everything all at once made the most sense. It provided the best balance for the game and allowed us to have a strong foundation from where to go next, and ensure that everything was going to be fairly stable and ready for all of the new things that we have coming on as well. With that, the first thing we're going to show off is the brand new Legion logo. So the Legion logo that you know and love has been radically updated. It's still very much Legion, but our graphic designer, Ryan Ritter, Star Wars extraordinaire, has done so many amazing things for all of the different Star Wars lines, including Shatterpoint and Legion, has updated the Legion logo. So this is going to be the new look. You're going to see this in all the packaging and everything else. One of the big reasons for this updated refresh in terms of the look and everything else, not just with the game rules, but again, this is a holistic thing, is the idea that we are moving into multilingual. So you've seen this maybe with some of our other products, the fact that we are now putting multiple languages into the single package. This is a really important step for us and for the gaming community, because what it means is it allows us to have a broader reach to provide these games in multiple different language pathways to communities that may not necessarily, or regions that may not necessarily have a big enough customer base or player base at the moment to be able to sustain those products, right? And so by combining them all together, we actually provide savings across the board to everyone. We make it easier for regions to have product in stock, for our distribution partners to be able to share that product, and ensure that people don't run into situations where they may not have a product available in their region for a long, long time. Additionally, by doing all this, it actually does reduce manufacturing costs and everything else. So it is a very substantial benefit overall. Even though it may seem like that wouldn't be the case because you're putting more in the box. So multilingual is a very important step for us. It's an important step for the communities in general, and we're excited to be bringing this to Legion. That also means that we have to look at everything from a graphic design and layout standpoint and visual standpoint to ensure that it is multilingual compatible. And some of the things we're going to show off and change have been affected due to that.
So it's a print and play game from here.
It is all set up for that way. Also to just give it a modern and the best look that we possibly can. It's not just the design and everything else that changed. We, of course, over the 3 years, have refreshed, rebalanced, and looked at all of the rules within the game, all of the units, all of the core mechanics and everything else. Not only have we updated the packaging and the card design and everything else, as you're going to see, we also had our amazing art team led by Preston Stone go through and effectively redo almost every single piece of Legion art and update it to a brand new modern look with brand new stylings. All of the art you're going to see in this presentation effectively is a marker of that. Command card art was updated, character card art was updated, unit card art was updated. Pretty much nothing was left untouched. I think overall we redid about 95% of the art when we took over the stewardship of the game. And so there's amazing new visuals. We're going to see that throughout all of this. So that's where we're at. The one thing I want to make clear is that, again, this is not a second edition. It doesn't invalidate anything that anyone has in their collection. In fact, all it does is update, hopefully rebalance, and bring new excitement to what you do have. The game is going to feel very similar. There are going to be, of course, as with most of these updates, a couple of rules changes that we're going to discuss. Additionally, well, we have 90 minutes. We're not going to be able to cover everything in detail. So we're going to give you like the high level look at everything. We're going to discuss things. We're going to hit the points that we think are most important to cover in person. But along with those documents, right after this panel, there's going to be I would call it a doctoral thesis on Legion, written by my fine fellow developers here as a group that effectively goes into all the changes, why we thought the change needed to be made, some of the data behind the changes and the way in which we changed them, and then kind of some examples as well as in terms of what this means for the overall effect and what it brought to Legion. So you can check that out as well. There's that's for all of the math junkies out there. There's going to be some good math breakdowns in there, talking about statistics and data and all that.
We did high level.
You used round numbers.
Yeah, we did high level.
I mean, there's no like chart.
We didn't go crazy.
Even though Mr. Ben Ransom did build a wonderful chart, which, let's be honest, shows your prejudice against the Imperial Army, because it was all about what does it take to kill a unit of stormtroopers.
I mean, that's true.
Yeah. How dare you, Ben?
Okay. So let's go ahead. Let's dive in, because it is time. One of the big things that players have been asking about, which has tickled us no end and made waiting for this moment very difficult, has been a lot of people have been asking, when is the battle deck going to get refreshed? When are we going to see new missions? When are we going to see some adjustments? Because obviously the original system was showing its age. Those cards and what they were asking you to do have obviously been around for a long time. They've supported the game and grown the game, but it was time for a modern take. It was time for new missions to come in and challenge players in new ways. So we have completely redone the battle deck. We're going to talk about that evolution right now. And here is the new mission dashboard. We're going to go through each of these items individually, and I'm going to turn it over to my fellow devs to start talking about
So we're losing around.
what the new mission deck is, what the new battle deck, the new missions, and everything are to do, what each of these sections are, and we're going to show you some examples of those cards to get that going as well.
Yeah, so we had a couple of big priorities whenever we're making the new mission system, adding progressive scoring into the game, and getting both players' battle decks involved so that you have a more collaborative experience for building the mission. So how it works is we added a priority roll to the game instead of the bid system. So you roll to see who becomes the blue player for doing the first mission setup action, and that player puts their mark on the blue player mark and reveals one of their objectives or secondary objectives randomly. And then the red player would then reveal the other one, and then they each reveal one of their advantages. So whenever they're doing that, after doing that, each of them can, starting in the blue player order, modify the mission once, so they can veto their opponent's objective that they put out and put out one of their own, or even change one of their own. The only thing that is for advantages, you can't put your own advantage into the opponent's deck. So
You got to use your own.
Your advantages are your advantages.
Yes.
advantages just give you something that is definitely something your own edge in the battle. So it's a guarantee that you have something that you like.
So one of the big goals here was to adjust the mission building process to make it more interactive between players, but also maintain the core identity of the basically the original system, where you could veto certain cards within the layout. By having both players get to use their cards, Tony, you can probably jump off this slide. I think we've looked at it enough.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. It is beautiful.
Yeah, there were 12 victory points there, which is the condition for winning the game. And 5.
We'll
We'll
dive into that.
there.
You'll remember. They'll know what the 12 is.
Yes.
But the goal was to make sure that veto system that bounced back and forth was still there, but to provide players more interactivity and more agency in terms of setting up the mission. So by allowing players the choice of replacing their advantage card, replacing the primary objective, or replacing the secondary objectives from their specific decks, it means that there's more cards in play, and there's more likelihood that players are going to have meaningful choices over what to use with their limited amounts of vetoes. I don't know if you want to talk more about that as well.
There's one thing that we haven't mentioned, which is you can also take blue player
Yes.
as one of your vetoes as well. So that is a pretty interesting thing there.
So yeah, we tested a lot of iterations with this, with more or less cards, or
More or less vetoes, more or less cards.
and basically
how
we were
many
just
cards, all
seeing
that kind of stuff.
what made for the best games and playtest.
Yeah,
So I mean, we got to see that quite a bit, and the 2 vetoes per side, starting with the blue player, so the red player gets the veto last. Is they both players feel like they have their own strong advantages in the system.
And by using both players' battle decks, it's much harder to end up in a situation where you're just blown out by the scenario.
Yeah.
Right,
Because
right.
if you say, hey, I really can't play this, you can veto it. And then hopefully they don't have a second thing in their deck. So like if you veto it, put yours in, they veto yours, put theirs in. Hopefully it's not one that just blows you out again.
Yeah,
If it
it-
is, you should probably change your army list.
It distills the previous iteration of how the battle deck worked into a more interactive version that is more fair for both players, as you just mentioned, and also you don't have perfect information, right? So previously you created a grid, and you would see, okay, if I veto that one, that's the next card that I have. Now you're flipping off a deck, so while you know what's in your deck, there is some variance there in it.
For sure.
It leads to a more interactive and fair experience.
If you get
for
down to
both
the last
players.
card of your deck, then you know what is there.
Right,
so
exactly,
you can,
yeah.
if
You
you
can
have
still do
a
that.
strategy, but it is very hard to kind of manipulate the system.
Yeah.
There were some other interesting things on that slide if we want to touch on for 2 seconds.
We can
Tony,
always
if we
go
can pull
back.
that
Tony
up.
can go back.
Can we go back to the slide?
Reverse Tony.
On the right-hand side of the screen here, you see 3 red tokens. Objectives are now 2-inch tokens, not 1-inch tokens.
Yep, the point of interest. Yep.
So those are the point of interest that are used in the primary objectives. And there's also a little half-range tool down there, which is very exciting, which gives us half-range measurements, which
we're
is
gonna
going
be
to be used a
talking-
bunch, and a bunch of stuff coming up.
We're going to be
So-
talking a lot about the importance of that half-range tool and being able to measure things that are not just 6 inches. Ben, if you want to talk about why there are 12 victory points on the map.
Yeah, so whenever a player gets to 12 victory points, at the end of the round, if a player has 12 victory points and they have more victory points than their opponent, they win the game. So
And how many rounds are there, Ben?
There are 5 rounds in a game of Legion now.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that as well when we get to the scenarios.
We will.
Yeah, there's
So-
a whole lot that went into that, so let's just keep it moving and we'll talk.
and we'll get there.
So let's go
Yeah.
ahead and start by looking at the. So we're gonna bury the lead a little bit. We're gonna start with the advantage cards and look at what the advantage cards are. Now, keen eyes probably realize that condition cards are nowhere to be found on anywhere on that dashboard. That's because the condition cards have been removed and they've been replaced with these advantage cards instead. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first one, which is Strafing Run. There are 6 of these. We're only going to talk about 2 just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. And I'm going to let the dev team take away whatever you want to say about advantages, where they go, and how these 2 different ones kind of represent different facets of the entirety.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why we decided to change to doing advantage cards instead of condition cards is the condition card could be a benefit for a player, or it could not, or it could really just not be impactful in the game. And so we wanted to pivot to advantage cards because this way you always guarantee that something on that dashboard that ends up being used for the game will be beneficial to you, right? So each player has an advantage. Obviously, you're going to pick one that will help out your army in some way, right? Like, and they vary, right? Like we're looking at Strafing Run here, so this is one where you get to put out an advantage token, and then
you get to do a strafing run.
You get to do a strafing run. You get air support to
out a
throw
lot
out
of
some
suppression.
suppression on enemy units. There's other examples like things that put out barricades. We're about to look at another one. Tony could go to the next slide. So there's this one here, Advanced Intel, that gives, during the first activation phase, you get an additional pass token to your pass pool.
Ben, what is a pass token?
So, pass tokens are how we track the number of passes a player has. So,
The number of passes. So now it's more than 1 is what you're telling me.
the number of passes is just the difference between the number of units each player has minus 1. So, really easy to figure out. If somebody has 9, somebody has 7, then you'll have 1 pass.
Great.
This gives you an additional pass on round 1. So on round 1, very important. Whenever you are deploying on round 1.
And we're going to talk about the changes to deployment in a second.
After we're through the missions, we'll
That's
talk
right.
about that. And
Right.
remember this card.
Remember this card that
this
you
is
can
very
get additional
relevant.
passes on the first round of the game. Okay, let's jump to the secondary objectives. Secondary objectives, another new add to the overall mission strategy and pool. So one of the things with the iterative scoring that was really important was the fact that just focusing on the primary mission didn't lead to as much choice and player options as possible. Pagani really wants to finish this off, so I'm going to let him talk.
Yeah, the secondary objectives were really there to add another shot of flavor into the primary objectives, as well as give players something else that they can do. So if you have a unit that can activate but cannot necessarily contribute to an attrition fight or cannot necessarily contribute to the primary objective, maybe they can do the secondary objective. So with those 2 things of a great flavor injection and then as well as a variety of things for units to do on the battlefield, secondary objectives played out great in playtest.
They also add a really great tension of I can try to continue to press on the primary objective, or I can try to grab the secondary objective first, give myself a score bump, or potentially break a dead heat and win the game, right? Now, doing so may come at the expense or be a gambit in terms of trying to continue to maintain a consistent pressure on the primary. So it really breaks up what players can do and what their tactical options and strategic options are. And each secondary, as we'll see, and we'll talk about these, can play into different styles of army construction and different factions overall from their identities.
Mark targets here is really
Kinda like your
straightforward.
vanilla one,
No,
bread and butter.
Yeah, it's very
Murder
straightforward.
things.
It's just about defeating units. But you get to choose 2 of your units. You get to choose 2 of your opponent's units, and each player does that. So generally, the ones that you choose for yourself are very hard to remove. So it is very much like a tactical bury your last victory points, make sure that they can't get to them, and keeping your most important things safe is the sort of ends up playing out usually that those aren't destroyed till towards the end of the game because you can play with them differently.
Yeah, you get two good options and two bad options, right?
Right.
And then how can you deal with that, and what units did you bring in your army that maybe your opponent can prey on, or what units can you bring in your army that your opponent can't prey on?
I think what you just said, how do you deal with that, is kind of an interesting question that, as Schick just said earlier, we want to kind of like increase the tactical and strategic options. One of the big things that we were doing with these new missions is we want to increase, the options that players have for, viable play styles and viable ways to create their armies, right? So, like we'll have different missions and different secondary missions that cater to certain army types, and we try to do a good job of, spreading that out to give players different options for, how they want to play and how they want to construct their battle deck to support their army and whatnot.
And so let's take a look at the second one. So mark targets obviously rewards you for destroying things. What we're going to look at next, bringing them to heal, plays a quite different flavor in terms of suppression. So right away, if you're playing Empire, if you're playing with a lot of suppressive in your army, this might be the secondary objection that you're going to dig for.
Darth Vader loves this card.
Darth Vader
He is
does.
all about it, for sure.
Yeah. So it's just every round, whoever has suppressed more enemy units at the end of the round, before they remove their suppression tokens, gains a victory point. So
And
it
you have
also,
these kind of stretch goals at the bottom, right?
right.
Yep.
So these are things you can score once per game. So if you panic an enemy unit, which is it takes quite a bit of focus generally, or suppressive weapons, then you score 2 victory points. And if you get a suppression token on everything that can have a suppression token, you get 2 victory points.
It's happening.
So like not there. So if they have like null courage, or they have tanks, you don't have to get suppression on those because you can't.
Yep.
But everything else.
In playtest, that one was, I really like this one because it led to really explosive end games where when people don't have a lot of units left, you can really score that like.
So it generally
suppression onto everybody.
only capable of doing this towards the end of a game,
Yeah.
and
It made
that
it
really
very
makes it very,
explosive
very
ends.
exciting. It flips the game over.
And let's talk a bit about a second. So in the previous secondary objective, there's a kind of a fixed number of victory points available there. And on this one, there's a variable amount, right? You have these, stretch goals at the bottom that you can, only get once, but then you can get one, it's starting
Effectively
the second
every
right?
round.
And so that kind of goes back to the progressive scoring of, some of the scenarios, objectives or secondary objectives have different rates at which you can score, and that goes into like, okay, like, do I want to build an army that's going to try to, blitz through to get those 12 victory points as soon as I can, and maybe I'm not as tough, durability and attrition wise, or do I want to try to play the long game and have a more attrition focused army?
Yeah, and so
I
that's
get
a
it,
great
Commander.
segue. Let's just
Obviously,
dive in and
it's-
start looking at what the new
I'm
primary
up in the air
objectives
on it at this moment. I'm
look
going
like.
to give it
We're
a
gonna go through
legit
all
chance.
6 of
I've
these,
got one tournament to
just so we
run
can
with it.
discuss each
And if I don't
in
agree
brief,
with it after
each of
that,
the different play styles, each of the different thought processes
yeah.
behind them, and how they kind of tie
Shifting
together.
priorities.
So the first thing that we're
it's
going to talk
battle
about
lines
is deployment,
minus
because you look at the map
range 3
cards,
on each
and
end.
immediately you'd say, okay, I understand from the old
It's a
system
range
that
1
red
and
is
a half.
is red players' deployment, blue is blue players' deployment. That's not true anymore. Those are called territories. Ben, tell us what a territory is and why it matters.
So a territory is an area where you can move in off the edge of the board whenever your unit activates. So all the units without special rules start off the board, and they move on with their first action, with their move action. So any of the board edges that are within that territory, you can start with the movement template touching those and move to the end of it. So
Connie, you want to talk a little bit about what this dynamic deployment in round 1 kind of brought to the game, some of the thought process behind it, and how it impacts a lot of the design that we're going to see going forward with missions and some of the units.
Absolutely. So because no one is deploying at all, you now have a very interesting cat and mouse game of when do you want to activate your important units? When do you want to activate your not important units? Where do you want to put them, right? Because there's no restriction on where you're putting your units until you've committed them to the battlefield. So if you have an ATST and they only have a few anti-tank weapons, you can wait for them to deploy those and deploy the ATSD somewhere else. It's just sort of a very basic idea of explaining what sort of this cat and mouse thing can go on here. There is also something called prepared positions, which essentially lets you set up your unit inside of your territory anywhere you want. Very similar to the old deployment
Yeah,
rules.
Retro Red, we're
You
going
get
over
free
new
dodge
rules
distance.
here.
And then there is infiltrate, which gets wild, but we don't need to go
All
into
new
that.
turn 0.
Yeah, I think that I personally was really skeptical about this at first, and then we were going through and playtest, and like you said, as this really dynamic kind of cat and mouse interactive deployment between the two players, and you're interacting right off the bat. It's not, like where you deploy and like, all right, like who wants to commit first, and we play this game of chicken. Like we're interacting right as soon as the game starts.
So it brings different considerations than deployment did before, where you're looking for the same things you did in static in the previous deployment, where you're looking for the right matchups and going to the right side of the board. But you're also looking for the right timing to make shooting attacks. You're looking for the right timing to you might want to deploy different things last in this system, because you might want they might be more important for that first round action.
And there's also a lot of consideration in army building for this kind of thing, right? What do I want to activate first? Can I activate something hyper durable that can go stand out in front of my opponent's army? Can I activate something super fast that can get out there and get behind the building or get behind some cover or something, right? So you have a lot of different options inside of the different armies for what you want to activate, when, and how it all works out in terms of round one.
And you get to play a command card, and you get all the command card effects. So there's still the same considerations of what goes into deciding on a command card, of how many orders you want to issue, what your initiative is.
It was really great to take the time that was normally spent in a, I don't want to say completely inactive or non-interactive way, but when you deployed, right, you were looking for, okay, I know everything's going to be on the table. I can kind of see what my opponent's doing. I'm going to try to make sure that I can't be shot. So where are my places where I can block all line of sight, so that I don't get overwhelmed by range 4 weapons that my opponent brought.
This round one is extremely exciting.
You get right. It's an entirely different system, because now you don't have to necessarily worry about, I only have a limited amount of completely line of sight block sections. So what am I going to sacrifice on the pirate, or how am I going to balance out the deployment that I have? Rather, you're able to bring these things on in a considered way that interacts in the way that the game normally plays. It just makes it feel more integrated into the entire experience. And I love the strategy and tactics. So let's talk a little bit about shifting priorities, and this one being effectively kind of the base experience, or the most normal battlefield situation, with its mostly centerline objectives and everything else.
I think it's worth mentioning that in the new primary objectives, there is no longer a map card that is part of mission building.
Right.
So shifting priorities will always use this map card and these territories and this objective setup.
Right, and we did that to make a consistent experience for how the armies, what they need to consider, and making it like the fair movement. That's so shifting priorities is essentially the objectives are right across the center of the map, right in between the two territories. And whenever you score one of these, your opponent then gets to move it so they can score it a little more easy in the next turn.
Or it makes you harder, right? So you have to keep pushing if you're pushing, and it is sort of a comeback mechanic type thing, where if you're not doing well in the scenario, it becomes easier for you to score.
Yeah, so it just changes where you need to go. It's going to change basically every round.
All right, so let's take a look at Recover the Research, which adds a bit more considerations. And of course, talking about shifting priorities, I think that one really favors a balanced list building approach, right? You need mobility, you need things that can hold positions. You need a good mix of stuff. As we go through these, you're going to find that each one of these scenarios does favor certain list builds, or ask different questions that then say, okay, what do I want to take instead? Recover the Research being?
Yeah, this is, you only have to contest objectives in order to score here. So that is, you only have to have one unit that is within their unit leaders within half range of the objective to score it.
So that is a change, right? It's no longer base to base. It's half range.
It was, yeah. Right. So the shifting priorities, securing was is what you do for most of the objectives, which is you have to have more units that are on the objective than your opponent.
Specifically.
Unit leaders.
Yeah, and so as they're saying, this is a scenario that very benefits fast armies. So if you have speeder units, they can get there and take the objectives, which, by the way, big change, vehicles can now contest objectives.
Yes.
Every unit in the game can contest objectives. So this scenario is very much about like, okay, I can spread out. I have to have mobility to get from point to point. I can threaten points that my opponent is weak on.
And it rewards you for spreading out.
And it rewards you for spreading out. I also want to talk a second about how the deployment change, how interesting it is where instead of walking onto the battlefield, instead of deploying range 1 from the edge, getting kind of that pseudo about foot back
That's true, yeah.
does a lot. If you want to expand
Yeah,
on that a little bit.
the armies start much farther apart, right? Because you're
Yes.
essentially starting range 2 farther apart, which makes the longer range guns more interesting because it gives you a lot of value for those. And then it also makes faster units much more interesting in how they can interact on turn 1 and things like that, especially against prepared position units and other things.
Yeah, buying back effectively an extra foot of space of the table.
It's very cool.
Has a phenomenal impact on each of the different roles for the units. It really opens up that breadth that you need to make range 3 to range 4 feel that much more impactful, to make speed 3 versus speed 1 that much more impactful.
You see a lot of units making moves.
Yes.
That
early moves.
That free
right?
compulsory move is very important.
So let's jump into intercept the signals. This one, I believe, is the brawl scenario,
Yeah, very brawly.
as Ben likes to call it.
So during each of the point of interest, each of the towers that isn't in your deployment zone are the ones you can score. So you have to get across the table. You have to get to the middle of the table, at the very least, to score. And you get 2 units that get tokens on them that make it so they only have to contest a score. So those units are rewarded for mixing into the opponent's side. If they skew to one side, you can still score the objective that's on that side with those units. And you keep getting those tokens back. You keep getting them on units as your units get defeated. So this makes it so taking the center of the table is very good, controlling,
This is rough.
destroying units, and also diving in with some units.
Yeah, I think it's what I love about this one specifically is that it's not just take the center of the table; it's hold the center of the table,
Right.
which is very different from a lot of the other scenarios where you
have
can
to
get in, you can get your points, and then if you get defeated, like
So now we get
okay, I
half
got my points.
ranges.
But this one is much more because it's a little slower and it's scoring. It's much more about staying there and holding it down and that kind of stuff. So
Let's move on to breakthrough, which this one is, if you love speeders and you love going fast, breakthrough is probably for you.
this is the Paplu scenario.
It is. It is the Paplu's wild
Paplu
rice
not in
scenario in
it.
a lot of ways.
But
So
He's
very
ready.
different territory
Chad's knocking me
deployments.
off
The
an
objective
edge.
placements, obviously. This kind of mimics the old deployments where it was lengthwise of the table rather than
Yes.
than width of the table. So talk a little bit about all of the different considerations that go into this one and kind of what it incentivizes in terms of play.
So this makes it so you are you need to put forces in places that are very, very spread out. You know, you essentially split your forces into 2 for the majority of your forces because you need to get to the opponent's objective that's on the right, and you need to get to their opponent's objective on the left, and you need to protect yours. So that big left-right divide makes it so where you deploy is extremely important.
Yeah, and it kind of has, it asks the players this question of like, all right, you kind of got this little attack and defend strategy that you have to do. All right, how much of my army do I want to dedicate to trying to push my opponent's points versus, defending my points? And like, oh, well, maybe if I have some fast units, not only can they go take my opponent's points, but maybe they can auto back and defend mine, if one of my flanks collapses.
or if you win a flank with a fast unit, it can then
it can-
recommit to the other
exactly.
side, which other units have no chance of doing.
And long-range shooting units, if they deploy in the middle of the objectives, they can affect either side, which gives them a kind of unique advantage that most units are not going to be able to do. They're not going to be able to very easily get from supporting one flank to the other flank.
One of the cool things I like about this territory map on this scenario is that it in playtests we found it's really common for you to deploy your units close to one of the objectives and then go towards the other one because that's the shortest route. But it's really interesting the units that have infiltrator prepared positions, right? They can appear anywhere in your territory. So if you have like a long range unit with prepared positions, you can kind of put that in the middle of your territory as kind of an anchor piece, right? It's like, okay, well now I have the flexibility, like I can go attack that
like
one,
range
or I can
4,
defend
range
this
5
one.
units with prepared position.
Yeah,
are
or if it's
great.
a fast
Yes.
unit with one, right? Like now you
Yeah.
get that extra flexibility where the other units in your army can't have it.
I think my favorite prepared positions trick on this one is deploying in a little corner right next to their territory. Like that is very close.
It's very
right?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
range
yeah.
2
You have to
guns
move
can
not
get in
very
there.
far.
So you can deploy very, very close
Especially
to your
if both
opponent's
players
objectives.
do that.
Yeah,
So
if both
then
players do it, like
then
it's
it gets
on.
really exciting.
It's on. It's time to party.
Let's go ahead and jump to the next mission, which is Bunker Assault. This one is for anyone who loves special forces, operatives, and commanders.
And gun lines.
And, of course, static gun lines as well.
Yeah, this is kind of a different flavor of the intercept the singles. So it's the same kind of what we saw before. Is you have to attack the points on your opponent's side of the battlefield, and if you are a commander, operative, or special forces unit, you are better at that. And it's kind of the same idea as Breakthrough as well, where you have this question of, okay, I have to attack their points and defend mine. How do I want to split up my forces, do that? On this one, however, the map is much more centralized, so you're not really having to split your force into two separate sections to do that. So it's kind of a mashup between some of the
And you have
other
this
missions.
huge score potential of if you can
Yes.
destroy their bunker,
Yeah.
then you're going to score 3, and you also stop them from ever being able to score it again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So playing with that and knowing the right cadence at which you want to remove the consistent scoring for the big score,
Mm-hmm.
I think makes this scenario much more interesting than it kind of looks at the front, where you're just like, well, we're just going to deploy and we're just both going to score, and the secondary objective is going to break it.
I think this
you
one
can really maximize based on destroying those bunkers and controlling that.
Breakthrough is really intense. Like it says, don't let the opponent score your objective. It makes it much easier for you to defend your home objectives. They're very advantage for you, the ones that are close to your territory. And the first person that breaks generally has, their opponent comes in and scores their objective. They're at a huge disadvantage at that point. So it's a very tense sort of standoffish mission.
This one also has very explosive ends.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
It's
if you
like-
blow up that bunker, then
Yeah, like you roll in round 4 or 5, and you're like, great, I was able to take both, and I was way behind before. Sweet, right? Like, and you get in there with your operatives and your special forces, doing all those cool operative special forces things. I love it. The narrative of this one.
This is also one
Is my
where we've
favorite.
seen, in our playtest games, where the secondary can be really important. Because it can be, if you have two very durable armies, it can be very hard to break through and capture those bunkers, and sometimes the secondary is what swings the game for you.
Yep. All right, let's look at the last one, which is Close the Pocket,
The weird one.
the weird one. So this is a good old refused flank style of missions. Very classic in terms of strategy and tactics.
Yeah, are you going to refuse or not?
Are you going
That's
to
the
refuse or
question.
not? Are you going to split? Are you going to try to go for all 3? Or are you just going to focus on a couple?
And this one, I think, gives you the most wild round 1 deployment questions of like, man, they haven't put anything
Oh yeah,
over
and
here.
if
Do I
somebody
go?
has
do I
that,
go? Yeah.
if somebody has that additional pass,
Like,
it's brutal.
it's-
So you normally can't pass twice in a row. So you're committing forces back and forth, back and forth. So this makes it so that deployment question is very
So
very
it's
tense.
intercept with
Yeah, but otherwise this one is pretty chill,
disarray
besides its
with
crazy
both players
points.
on
So
the same
scoring the
side.
center gets you 2 victory
2.
points,
Everybody else has won.
which is very mobility centered. You generally have to make 4 moves with a speed 2 unit to get there, right around.
But didn't have any help, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and I think it leads to interesting questions, strategy-wise. I know in our playtest games, I've thought to myself, all right, do I want to, take the approach of I want to rush that middle point with some fast units that necessarily aren't as durable, or do I want to, wait till later in the game when I have some, infantry units that may be more durable, but it's going to take them longer to get there, right? So it's, how do you want to approach the strategy of taking that center point?
And this
that's
gets
very
really
far away?
exciting with whenever the table setup is not good for, so like deciding table side is huge here, because this is one of the more deployment deciding how the forces are matched up scenario. So the table setup here, blocking that center objective from one of the flanks, means your opponent gets to predict where you're going much more easily, and so it is. It can get very intense for competing for blue player to try to get see who gets which side.
I think that's another really interesting thing that we should chat about, right? Is the idea that having the deployment zones be locked to red and blue player, and then having that, like, you might ask, okay, why am I really competing for red or blue outside of this ability to go first? The goal is that tables are not symmetrically designed, right? No battle takes place over a perfectly symmetrical battlefield. Players must deal with, or generals must deal with, the idea that there may be terrain that favors one side or the other. And so this really allows players to explore that idea, yet maintain a competitive balance of where there are choices. You're not getting locked into the bad table side. You have every opportunity to take the table side that you think will benefit you at the expense of other things.
Yeah.
And it leads, as we found, right, it really opened up table setups. You could create really interesting questions that felt fair to the players because you have the ability to affect that stuff. I really love what it does from a, as a hobby miniatures and a hobby guy who loves building tables and making interesting stuff and getting as much terrain on the table as possible, right? Like for me, for Dallas and I, the possibilities it opens up in terms of just asking those questions, making each game feel impactful, making the battlefield part of the story of the battle in ways that, you don't see that in every miniatures game. A lot of the times they rely on the idea that, like, well, if you put a building on this corner, put a building on that corner. If you put a thing here, put it over there, right?
Yeah.
Like, make sure that it is quote unquote fair. And that's fine. But
whenever it's not fair, the gameplay gets very interesting.
Right. That's what makes that's what really brings out, I think, the tactics and the strategy. And of course, players have complete control of that if they want to continue to set up with like symmetrical designs or take turns setting up terrain. But the reality is that this system does really allow and account for the idea that the battlefield is not symmetrical, that it is a player within, and that the choice of deployment, edge, or territory is absolutely a critical consideration and one that players will vie over just as much as they will for a priority mission objective or a secondary or even maybe the advantage that they feel like they need in order to maximize on it. So everything about all of the changes that we talked about, right? It's all about adding that interactivity, those tactical and strategic considerations, making the game feel alive. Speaking of making the game feel more exciting and alive, we do have a couple of core rules changes. We don't have slides for these. We're just going to discuss them. But these are important ones to bring up. So first and foremost, Star Wars has always been about, Star Wars Legion especially is about capturing the idea of these big battles, these cool engagements, all this stuff. The game has been around, as we said, for 6 years now. Players have been with it for that entire time, growing their collections, building their armies. It was really starting to show that the 800 point level was it was an artificial ceiling that was stymieing some really cool choice from players. It was forcing less interesting list builds, and it also was just not allowing the game to really live its full best life and live that kind of narrative on the table that we want to see of these big Star Wars legions, right? The name of the game is Legion. We want to see legions of troops on the table. So we've increased the game size with the changes to the mission objectives, with the changes to cover, which we're going to talk about next. And of course, with deployment and all of this, we were able to increase the game size to 1,000 points, which is it's a moderate change, right? It's not like we went to 1,600. That would have been crazy. But those 200 points really open up a lot of options, from upgrades to different units to adding maybe a couple of like support units,
To taking
more characters.
112.
112.
I don't know about that yet.
I think my favorite part of the increase in the points change is that I remember back to when we were working on Asajj Ventress, and we're like, all right, we have this cool character. Thematically, she should do things with Count Dooku. Well, when you take her and Count Dooku in the same army, that approaches very quickly half your total army points, or a third.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things about this this extra 200 points is it gives you just enough room to, if you want to have two, kind of expensive characters, you can do that. Or if you want to take some more expensive toys to add some spice to your army,
and you don't end up at like 7
You have
activations.
tanks
and
and the
you're
rest
not
of
you're
your
not
army,
constrained, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not giving up, you can still have the core of your army and some of the toys you want, but now have room to do that and not have to give things up for
I think the Asajj Dooku thing is a really important bit, right? One of the consistent things that we see from all the players whenever they have discussions about things they wish they're dreaming about will come to the game, or when we ask directly, like, what are the things that you want to see? Star Wars is about the characters, right? Legion is an army game, and therefore the units and the army itself is the primary point. Seeing those iconic characters on the table, seeing them work together like we do see, in the Clone War shows, in the big battles at Endor, being able to take multiples of the original trilogy characters together, that's super important. But with 800 points, it's not very realistic to be able to do that and see a lot of success, right? At the point that you're playing all of the original trilogy heroes together in one list, you're kind of playing a for funsies. You shouldn't expect to go and do super well with it because you're just lacking tools based on the points limitations.
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway from this is the goal was to open, one, increase the spectacle of the game, but two, to open up avenues for players to kind of build the armies they want. Whereas before, like, oh, I really want to do this, but like that may not be as viable as I want because I'm constrained by the point cost limit. So we really want to open up avenues for players to play the armies with the play style or the flavor or the selection of units that they wanted.
And the other big part of the spectacle and kind of increasing the scope and really leaning into the idea that this is Star Wars Legion and we should see legions is that you're going to notice as we dive into the rebalances that there's a brand new upgrade for most of the core units. In fact, I think all of the core units got this in this group of rebalances. I think. No? Did we not do one? It doesn't matter. Most of them got it. I'll say 90% because who's going to actually do the percentage? It's fine.
Ben will.
Somebody will now.
Somebody will now. They all have a brand new upgrade which allows them to effectively double their unit size. So if your maximum was 6, it's now typically 10. If you happen to be a B1 or an Ewok unit, it's now 14. So these open up really cool tactical options, especially when combined with all the things we've talked about with missions. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as we get to it, but that is another big thing. Now,
It's going to lead us straight into cover.
all of this is only possible by probably one of the most significant core rules changes, which is the change to cover. And I'm going to let all of the math folks talk about cover, line of sight, and why that half-inch range tool is going to get used all the time in your games.
Yeah, so the big changes to cover are that it's consistent based off of what the size of your unit is. It doesn't matter if you're firing with 1 B1 or 13 clones.
Yeah. Dude,
What,
just
11
insane.
clones.
I don't want to buy more Ewoks. And you're sitting here talking,
The cover's going to affect you the same. So we changed to static from a static system where light cover blocks 1, heavy cover blocks 2, to rolling a die for each hit result on the attack rolls.
And very specifically, not crit results.
Not
So
crit.
crits
Still get
ignore
through.
cover.
Yeah.
Right.
So effectively, instead of cover just being a flat modifier to the number of hits, it is now a randomized roll.
Yeah, you're rolling 1 white die, and for light cover, you only get 1 of the results, and for heavy cover, you get 2 of the results on the white die. Yep. So,
And then whatever you have left over, you will then have to make saving throws as normal, right?
yeah.
And there's a bunch of explanation in the article that's going up at the end of this for why we've done this, the math behind it, all sorts of implications of it. It's a huge portion of the article.
I think,
So if you want to get into the math portion of it, that's what's for you.
the big ones to hit, right, are that one of the major things this change does is that it dramatically affects the range at which dice pools become either meaningless or so effective that there's no real reason to roll, right? So the predetermined nature of how the math works out dramatically changes. It also creates a more engaging and exciting system, right?
Whenever you flip your token over, you can always do something.
Correct.
With that unit.
And I think the vast majority of players, right? There are always going to be players who just love predictability. But the vast majority of us have come here, we play dice games because we want to see the spikes, right? We want to see the amazing outcome where you roll 15 white dice and somehow you hit blocks on all of them with your light cover from a bush.
It happens every time we play
And-
test, and I hate it.
And you
I
also want
cannot
to
make
see
a cover save to save
you
my
also
life.
want to see the result where
Good at
like
winning these
you
games.
just need to roll 2 results on your white defense dice to maybe hold out, and you roll nothing, right? So adding that unpredictability, it brings the chaos of battle. It brings the unknown of battle to the game, and it also means that every unit gets to compete throughout the entire course of the game. Eliminating 2 members of a unit to reduce their dice pool to effectively what was mathematically meaningless.
Mostly
now
irrelevant,
now doesn't necessarily happen
As
because
a
those players can do that. Of course, there's that element of luck.
As a consequence of that, even small units being dangerous, the game is overall more dangerous.
It is more
Right.
lethal. Yeah.
Right, more lethal because those small units being able to participate still means
Well,
that
it's huge, right?
it cut out a large portion of the attacks of the game, and so this units just keep activating, and get to do something on their activation much more often.
And how you determine if you're in cover or not, you're going to use that new half range tool,
Which is 3 inches.
which is 3 inches, which will be included with the files that are
There's a
going
little
to
print and play cutout,
Yep.
or you can make your own.
Make your own 3-inch widget as well.
Um,
And I think this was, the 3-inch. So this is one of the things that was most exciting about going back into this. We did the full core rules update, and we affected how cover and line of sight worked, and we did it in order to try to streamline the process. But one of the after effects of that was the fact that, without a way to measure accurate ranges to terrain that you might be taking cover against, it was very easy on a Legion table if it was set up properly to always have cover, and that was not necessarily an ideal, but we were willing to accept it for what it brought in the other ways.
it wasn't time to add the half range
Correct.
tool. Yeah, right.
But by adding the half tool, not only are we now able to measure a lot of different things for scenario setup to contesting ranges, not being base to base anymore, and securing ranges, we also have a way in which to make cover meaningful, but also not omnipresent, right? So that there is more tactical consideration in movement and placement and all these things. And so it was a really huge addition to the game and the system that we're excited to finally be bringing in and goes along with this cover thing. And the one thing I do want to touch is we talked about how smaller units are now more effective and can continue to participate. But I think the flip side that we also have to recognize with the cover system is that,
larger units are not.
In original, as we started talking about how are these larger units going to function within Legion, it was very quickly apparent that they just blew out the game because they could overcome that static cover of
very easily.
two basically two negated hits.
What in the hell is
Now,
this?
because your cover save is effectively equal to the number of hits you suffer, those bigger dice pools have more variance.
Well, it's one clone trooper is just as lethal if there's one clone trooper or as if there's 10, right? So combining dice pools into large buckets is no longer just the sole winning strategy for destroying units quickly, right?
But there's still some sort of like these linear defenses, like in low profile and armor,
and
still,
dodge tokens,
right?
things like
Yes.
that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So
But
So-
getting rid of that floor really helps smaller dice pools
feel more relevant.
feel
have
more
a
relevant.
target where they can do something.
Yeah, where they can
yes.
do something besides just put a suppression token on something.
Yeah.
The amount again, the amount that the band went from here of dice pool effectiveness to like here was huge, and those impacts will be felt throughout all of the new development that you're going to be seeing, new units as they come out,
Even Chad
the ability
doesn't
to
understand
make
what
scenarios that have interesting layouts and deployments, to have iterative scoring. So much of it was based on the idea of breaking out of kind of that restriction, that artificial restriction put into place by heavy cover or cover in general, just being a flat, predictable value, and instead turning it back into something that can be very powerful. It can lift you up or it can let you fall to the ground.
Yeah, and while we're on the subject of like cover and durability, one of the reasons why going back to the bigger units for a second, one of the reasons we decided to do that was a lot of the missions have objectives that are more centrally located, and the fact that we now score progressively instead of at the end of the game or on certain rounds means that units have to stand in a place where they can get threatened a lot more. Right, and so with the previous cover system, we were seeing that it was hard to either dislodge units or units were no longer effective. So these large units kind of give units the ability to kind of sit out on a point and take shots and still stay in the fight. But then you're spending more points on it, right? You're putting more eggs in one, significantly more points. You're putting more eggs in one basket, right? And because these smaller dice pools are now more relevant, you have to ask the question of like, all right, do I want one big unit that can take a few hits before it goes down, or do I want to take a few smaller units, right? Because those dice pools are more relevant now with the cover change.
And I can spread out.
I can spread out more. It gives me advantage in deployment, because I have more units and I can decide
And absolutely
when to commit.
important to note, right? A full-size unit of 10 still only counts as one unit for
Correct.
contesting, whereas two smaller units,
Yep.
which are effectively the same point cost of that, depending on the units and upgrades and stuff, wind up counting for two. And I think that's the last little point to make about all of this, is that as we looked at this, the goal wasn't to move the game into everything being a 10 unit core,
Absolutely.
right? A 10 trooper core. The goal was to create something that was a interesting and fun option, and largely to see players identify with both, right? And I think one of the really great things is and again, this is a 3-year process of testing these things, reiterating and all of this. It's effectively what we've been doing secretly behind the scenes, not saying anything for so long as our like little inside started to burst. It's not a win if they're useless, right? If they're just cute
I got
and you
like
look at
3
them and you're like,
different
well, I
chats
could
pulled
take
up, and I
10,
had
but
one
why
go
would I ever
off.
do that? That's silly. It wasn't a win if it was, well, the only way to play the game is to take 10. It was only a win if it was,
people
there are
stating that
times
they're
where I
only
want to
gonna
take a
get away
full-size
from
unit
40K.
over two smaller units.
30,
There's
30,
times where I want to
40K,
take
and I'm
2
like,
smaller units over a full-size
I
unit.
totally get that.
And a lot of the time, I want to have a mix of both. Right?
Yeah.
Maximizing heavy weapons is another reason why you'd want the smaller units, because you still only get one heavy weapon.
There's just
And
a lot more
there's
choice.
there's a
in
lot of
choosing
choices.
your core units in particular.
And
Yeah.
I think the other thing that was really interesting about that is going back to how we talked about each scenario building and kind of focusing around different list builds or asking different questions. where you will find yourself looking at those options between a full-size core unit and a min-size core unit somewhat comes down to what 3 cards you're putting into your primary objective
Absolutely.
deck
Yeah.
and what you want to pull out
Who
of
your
that.
commander is, you know.
Okay, with that said, we have a bazillion
We gotta go.
rebalance cards to go into. So we're going to look at the Rebel Troopers first. So the Rebel Troopers are going to be the first rebalance card. So one, you can see the amazing new graphic design that Ryan Ritter and the graphic design team put together. I love this new look.
It's so clean.
You're going to notice that all keywords are just now keywords. There is no reminder text. One, that makes localization much more achievable and cleaner, but also one of the things with the reminder text is we didn't always have room to put the full rules on the card,
Correct.
which meant that new players would look at the reminder text, think it was the full rules
Or it could
text, get very
change.
confused. It could change. This just makes the whole
news is
system
I'm
of
getting all this
referencing
stuff
things
posted
cleaner
up
and more
on
accurate.
the main Discord,
I
so
love the
we're
fact
gonna
that we get to get Preston's amazing art in full scale on the back of the card now.
Absolutely.
It turns them into a very trading card look when you have them in your
They've always
binder.
said nimble.
So just incredible work over all around.
Agile gives
Kudos
them
to
the,
all of the folks
dodge
who
on
went
move.
in and made these new cards. This new design just
These are-
sing.
these are stuff.
That
Just
actually
sing.
made Rebel
All right, let's talk about
a
Rebel
lot
Troopers
better.
real quick.
So I think before we talk about Rebel Troopers,
Ah!
we gotta back up a second. We gotta go. I'm gonna back this car up for a second. We're gonna, one of the things we talked about is we really want to lean into each of the factions having their own identity.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like Empire having their own identity, Rebels, Separators, and so as part of that, we redid all of the core units in the game as part of that
Yeah, but they
aim
don't
to.
search.
Or we looked at every core
Or
unit
we
in
looked
the
at every
game.
core unit, right?
Yeah.
And tweak them in some way to further play into not only that
we can go
faction
search on
identity,
Rebel-
but to also ensure
on
that
Rebel
each core unit
attack
had a role
until
in the army,
fleets
right? So
had
they,
significant
some more
loss.
specialized than others, depending on what the
Vets
unit
got
is.
it
But
with the
that
black.
you have a role for each different kind of core unit, and that role kind of dovetails into the greater faction identity.
Rebel
All right,
Troopers.
let's
Now
talk
we're going.
Rebel Troopers.
Beautiful.
Speaking of faction identity, one of the things about Rebels, they're dodgy, they're nimble, they're hard to pin down, they kind of fold once you
surge
apply any
attack.
pressure to them. Agile 1 and nimble.
Yep. So nimble, what they had before. Agile 1, every time they move, they get a dodge.
Yeah, so we really needed a unit for Rebels that could move up the table, and really liked getting next to objectives, right? Like this was, so Rebel Troopers getting Agile means that they can move twice in round 1, get 2 dodge
kinda
tokens.
did the,
They're quite a bit safer than any other unit that's deploying off the side that's not getting benefits like that. So they are your core of the army that can go and do objectives for you.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the different roles of each of these units. This is sort of the generalist core
Yeah.
unit for Rebels.
But
right?
leans into that faction identity of being mobile and
Absolutely.
dodgy, but maybe not as durable as.
And then really quick, we're going to jump and look at the new upgrade cards. So the upgrade card style has completely changed as well. They've gone to full LCG style cards to provide more text room. And of course, just be a little easier to organize since you don't need to manage 2 different types of cards. This is effectively how all of the
Squad upgrades.
squad upgrade cards look for adding those additional troopers to the normal units. So you'll see here, add 5 Rebel Trooper miniatures.
Indomitable lets you remove a little extra suppression. You get a little extra cohesion range.
Cohesion is now measured with range tools. I would like to point
Range
out.
tools,
So we get
yes.
a half range instead of the short.
short move.
And this is range 1, so you can utilize several pieces of terrain. And then it can't be come out of transports because there are too many of them.
And we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yep.
All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the icon, the very first of his kind in Legion, Luke Skywalker, hero of the rebellion. He's got quite the glow up here. So if we want to really quickly just kind of go over some of the larger design beats on what we were looking to do with this version of Luke.
Yeah, so Luke has a whole charge in with a lightsaber theme that is very, very, very good. He's very, very good at, but he's still learning the ropes and still deciding exactly what he wants to do. So he has some other options for whenever it's not good to commit. So he has his blaster, which has long shot now, so he can aim and shoot at range 3 if it's too dangerous for him to commit. And he has Inspire 2 now to keep his army in line.
He's the hero of the rebellion.
He's the hero of the rebellion.
he
They
gets-
look up to him
Yeah.
like a big brother. Let's talk real quick about his points.
Yep.
Because this is going to be a trend throughout all of the Force users now. In that you're going to notice some significant point reductions There's one
But he has
specific
search
reason
code
about that,
native now.
and that's for a card we don't have, but it's called Force Push.
Yep.
Who wants to walk us through that?
There's been a significant increase in the point cost of Force Push because Force Push is incredibly powerful. It is even more powerful when you start introducing scenario play. It allows you to move around enemy troops. There's a million different tricks you can do with it, all
I'll
that
have to
kind of
go
stuff.
back and look it up,
So we
but
found
it
that
won't
Force
matter.
Push existing as an upgrade was massively inflating the cost of a lot of these Force user characters. So by transferring the points from the characters to Force Push, we can now have versions of these characters that cost significantly less points that do not have Force Push, that allow you to take a lot more things in your
So you
army.
get this Luke Skywalker, which has a ton of options, can still take burst of speed. You know,
Yeah, you can still take
for
all the
whatever
other
he
force
commits.
powers.
Yeah.
And I think that opens up a lot of space for these Force users. Of your first option is not necessarily going to be, oh, okay, I'm going to put Force Push on them, right? It opens up a lot of play styles for these characters now that they're at a lower price point.
You were paying as we discovered, you were paying an invisible tax for some of the upgrades that you could take because those upgrades were so potent, but they were deflated in price because it was just assumed in some ways that you would take them. In order to obviously open up list building and create more choice, obviously moving that, and which we did in a couple of other situations as well, but not as significant as Force Push, was a huge deal. Let's go to Leia Organa, which is the next refresh card that we have to show.
So Leia's a bit of a mix between commanding the army, which she is
finally
very
got
good at,
Exemplar on Leia.
and shooting. So she can be very active with getting dodge tokens
token
with
sharing.
take cover, giving those out to multiple units
Leia
and
was-
herself,
when we
and with
released
Exemplar
Padme,
on her.
everybody
Yeah, let's talk
Leia's
about that for a
Yeah,
minute.
that's the
Oh.
big one.
So Exemplar
You're just the
is,
worst version
we
of
sort
Padme.
of view that as a very much a commander ability, right? So this is
Right.
them leading their troops. This is them giving them tactical advice. This is them doing those things. So you're going to see this pop up a lot. And this is going to pop up on the characters that are not normally excellent combat pieces, that are more that stand back and
Yeah.
don't fight, which Leia obviously here is a very capable piece with a sharpshooter 2, 3 red dice on a range attack, all that kind of stuff, right? Fantastic in that. So this one is maybe not the best example of
Well,
that.
no, I think it is actually, because what Exemplar does that's kind of subtle versus just the normal take cover is take cover. It really ties that handing out tokens to her activation. So now when she goes in the round is very timing dependent. Exemplar,
She even got a range bump, too.
frees it up to, okay, I can hand some tokens out, but I can keep some of myself, for my friends around me to use. Frees up her actions a bit more, so she can contribute in other ways, like moving or attacking.
And take cover in those other type rules that gave out dodge tokens really just said, hey, shoot the other unit, right? Whereas Exemplar, you take cover, you give it to Leia, she can get her dodge tokens, and now you can't shoot anyone near Leia, so you have to interact with this rule that's giving
It's
out
a great
these
way to
dodge tokens,
facilitate
right?
the support, giving out support just in time.
Yeah.
Notably, take cover, spotter, bolster, and those other token handout actions have now been
Range
increased to
2.
range 2.
Yeah.
So again, this is to open up some play patterns for these
We
characters
revealed
that
the
they can do
CRP
things
was
other than
listed as
just
version
move in
2.5,
their
so this is
token
3.0.
handout
There
action.
were some updates to Exemplar as well, so it doesn't work entirely exactly as it did before, I
Yeah, a
believe.
little bit.
So make sure you
Our
check that out
current
as
rule
well.
book.
All right, let's jump to the Rebel Officer. I think the big takeaway here is another addition of Exemplar in order to kind of maximize the idea that this guy is just all about leading
Since
people.
day one.
Basically,
He
just
doesn't-
a leader.
He,
Yep.
he just yells orders and people do it, and
Yep.
they love it, or
We're
they
going to see
don't.
this theme through all of
Yeah,
the
a lot of the commanders.
Let's go to everyone's favorite
Oh, wow.
droid
I
boy
wasn't expecting
R2D2.
Exemplar on a
just a little guy.
Just a little guy with a secret mission.
R2D2.
He gets secret mission. He gets to sneak in with infiltrate and inconspicuous and try to get across the board with his speed 1, which he can very capably.
He's free. He's not grounded anymore.
So,
yeah.
you want to talk really quick about the change to infiltrate and what that means?
So infiltrate, whenever you act, so you start off the board still, but the first time you activate in the game, you place yourself within the territory instead of deploying off of the board edge. So that gets them 9 inches up the
tells me that
table
3PO
to
becomes
anywhere
on
inside of
the
your
map instead
territory,
of,
mostly.
So it's
an
super
attachment
flexible.
to our
Right.
And I think another big hit here is that secret mission used to
watts.
be a potential 33% victory point swing.
Yeah, now it's
now
1 and 12.
Now it's 112.
Yeah.
One say,
It's kind of like a tertiary objective.
Yeah, it's still very good and can be majorly impactful to winning the game, but it doesn't skew the overall win experience like it had before when there were many fewer victory points on the table.
R2D2 is a great way to break ties, basically, break stalemates.
Bounty has also had a similar adjustment to just being 1 victory point.
Let's go ahead and take a look at another core unit for the Rebels, which is Fleet Troopers. Charge, I think, is the big note here.
Yeah, these are my boys. They also got a melee profile on their pistol, so they are very, very deadly and still very, very fragile. So you have to hide them and ambush people with them. They are quite, a great ambush unit.
And I think comparing them to Rebel Troopers, right? Rebel Troopers had the agile, they had the nimble, they can get up the table, they can be much more durable. These Fleet Troopers are a lot more aggressive in terms of the blaster pistols
They're
with charge.
not as durable.
They're certainly not as durable. So that's sort of the main difference between those two core units, right? Is that they're both moving up the table, and they both can move up the table. But the Fleet Troopers are not going to be hanging out for too long, and hopefully your Rebel Troopers will be hanging out for a little longer.
You got to be really crafty.
They're not here for a long time.
You got to be really crafty if you're going to get that full, 10-person Fleet Trooper
20
unit,
dice shot or
20
something.
dice attack. You got to be careful.
And then the final core, and of course, just like the Rebel Troopers and everything else, you can obviously jump this unit up to the full 10 Trooper squad. Rebel Veterans are going to be the next one we're going to look at. This kind of rounds out the 3 core choices for Rebels. Prepared positions. So let's discuss. Infiltrate says that you start off the board. When you get your order to activate, you place yourself anywhere in the territory.
Prepared
positions is?
You deploy before the game starts, and you start with a dodge token. So this is you're in a sort of fixed stationary position at the beginning.
You're dug in.
And you're dug in. And these guys are excellent at dugging in with low profile, digging in. So they are your kind of entrenched Rebel troops.
Yeah,
I think the speed is much slower
here,
now.
right?
Yes,
One is the big one.
They're very much the rule of like, all right, I am going to have these guys defending, my side of the battlefield and my points, and they're going to use their range to project and help the rest of the army advance that way. But they themselves are probably not going to get across the battlefield.
And of course, the emplacement trooper coordinate is just lovely.
Which leads us to our next
speaking
card.
of.
Speaking of,
1.4 FD laser cannon team, please.
yeah. So this unit also got prepared position, so you kind of get to dictate, those fire zones and control the board, sections of the board before your opponent moves on, right? So you can threaten, and play into that deployment game of, all right, well, do I really want to commit a unit over here, knowing that I've got, a laser cannon team staring me down that might have an order because there might be a Rebel veteran unit next to it.
Having the fixed, so having the objectives, know where all the objectives are before, you know where units are going to go. So being stationary, you can get around it and place them in range 5 to threaten multiple objectives.
You got to shut lanes down with them too.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and talk really quick. We're going to look at the Rebel Commando strike team. However, this is going to be a kind of a discussion of strike teams in general, because strike teams have had a pretty distinct change from how they work within Army construction.
Yeah, the main rule is detachment. So you need to take one of the full units of Rebel Commandos in order to take a strike team. So they come paired, and that detachment also makes it so they don't fill out the maximum rank requirement for special forces. So you can have 3 full units of Rebel Commandos
and 3 strike teams.
Yes.
And remember, when assessing strike teams at the moment, smaller dice pools, much better than they used to be.
Yeah, the sniper teams especially we saw be very
excellent.
effective with the changes to cover. You're no longer just plinking one person with Pierce, right?
We made points changes there. So, yes, the snipers are crazy.
Let's go ahead and take a look at the ATRT. This is going to lead into a larger discussion about vehicles. So remember, as we discussed, vehicles can now score. So they can contest, they can secure objectives, so they're just as effective at that as any other core unit or anything like that. But armor here, I think, is the discussion to have, because it's going to be a recurring theme for all of the armored units going forward.
Yeah, so there is no kind of full armor left in the game anymore. Armor is now just the armor X keyword, so every vehicle will have a different numerical armor value. And part of the reason that we did this was because vehicles score now, we found through playtests that you could get in situations where there would be one vehicle or maybe multiple vehicles for some of the smaller vehicles that would kind of hang out on points, and it was very, very difficult to dislodge them.
We want people to be able to interact with them.
And we want people to be able to interact with them. So in the case of the ATRT, that means it went from full armor to armor 2, but then it got a little bit of a defensive buff with that
surging.
Yes. Yeah.
And I love the parity this brings, right? The ATRT is the armor 2.
Yeah.
The dude on top who's just hanging out, that guy's got a white surgeon.
He's a rebel with a white surgeon save.
It brings parity of save.
Let's go ahead and look at the Rebels' best hoopty, the X-33 land speeder. So this lost its transport for 1. Of course, has armor 2. And these are super awesome mobile weapons platforms now. Like
These things
I
are
love running all
incredible.
of these things.
Yeah.
They are incredible. Yes, getting to objectives and
Show me my bus.
defeating everything
Show
there,
me my bus. That's all
destroying
I
everything
really
there
see
is
is
incredible
toys.
with these guys. These being able to score and being fast and being relatively durable with cover and armor, and the option for cover too.
Well, and a lot of their dice pools can be somewhat on the smaller side, but now because of the cover change, those dice pools are suddenly very relevant. Whereas before, maybe you'd have to pool all of them together into a single attack.
Oh man,
So,
man.
really enjoy playing with these. Yeah, they're kind of a mobile gun platform now rather than a taxi
day with
service
a bus
for
after it
operative
first
loop
come
or
out.
whoever.
But now let's talk about transport. Tim.
Yes.
The AA5.
AA5.
please. So transport,
Armor 5,
we'll give you the
okay,
short version.
overground.
Yeah,
And you can go read the full
Reposition
version.
once per game
transport.
at the beginning of the game before deploying any
Very
unit, you
similar to how it
decide
did
if a unit
prior.
is
I'm
in the
okay with
transport,
this.
and whenever the transport deploys, that unit deploys
Instead of
from that
full armor, we
transport.
got
A
armor
core
5,
special forces.
A core special forces unit.
which
yes.
might as well be
So
full armor.
that gets the unit onto the table in round one, and
Significantly
then
farther forward than it normally would.
right, and then you can't use the transport again. So this is like another way of deploying
Yeah.
a special form of deployment.
It also gives
And-
the unit an order in round
Yes.
one.
It gives the unit an order so that you
have
don't
to
mess up
activate
the
it
order. Yes. Yeah, the order of activating them.
Approximately
Yeah.
I really like my Death Troopers hopping out of the Gav with their order ready to go and use the grenade launcher. It's quite fun. And like the other vehicles, the A5 has switched from having full armor to armor 5.
And has plenty of customization in terms of what it wants to do with its upgrade cards. All right, let's jump into the Empire rebalanced units that we're going to talk about today. And we're going to start off with General Veers,
Yeah,
so another exemplar.
Yeah, and one of the things we've tried to do with these character updates is really make like, all right, we're going to
Okay,
pick
so
to
we're
do
making
this,
token
like
sharing
Luke
with
Skywalker
everything,
at this
not
moment in
just
time, what's the best
entertainment.
version of that Luke that we can make? And so General Veers is a great example of that philosophy, right? Like he's known as the vehicle guy for Empire, right? He leads the ground assault with Blizzard Force on Echo Base, so we gave him Guidance Ground Vehicle to really cement his spot as the vehicle commander
Guidance
for Empire.
and ATST to have it stand by is
Yeah,
incredible.
is great. He's got Spotter and Exemplar to have kind of the same, economy with Leia. His range attack has gotten a little bit better now that he can contribute more. His action economy is freed up a
Yeah,
little
it
bit.
did. No more 3 watt.
Keep going to the next guy.
Now let's look at the Imperial Officer. So again, we're going to see, similar to the Rebel Officer, Exemplar, we have Spotter 1.
This gives you just kind of
Inspire.
minimal commander. Yeah.
So moving on to the
Makes
next one,
sense.
Director Krennic. So Krennic himself also got quite a few
Krennic.
touches, and
get some
we're not really showing all of them, but it is important to note that many of the command cards around these characters were also updated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if there's anything specific we want to call out on Krennic here, or if we just want to jump to Annihilation
Yeah, he got
Looms.
Exemplar and one of his command cards changed. You
Yep.
can go
So we're going to go ahead and take a look at
Looms.
Annihilation Looms.
So yeah, the design of the command cards has been changed, and we had to change this one because of the change from 6 to 5 rounds. The old command card did not work, so now it has been adjusted to rounds. The extra suppression is rounds 4 and 5.
Annihilation Loom's super fun on Bring Them to Hill.
It is
just
super
gives,
fun.
It gives both players all the points. It's just everybody has
Yeah.
points.
The good news is
It's
It's
great.
quite fun.
So let's take a look at the bread and butter core unit of Imperial armies, which is Stormtroopers. Stormtroopers, no real changes except for a points decrease.
Yeah.
But obviously the standard utility troop
I've been
of
using
Empire.
the,
You know,
Windows.
they're
Yeah,
able
those
to
red
do
saves are
everything not
still doing
specifically
work,
well.
and now they're even more efficient. They lost a little bit on their melee attack
just gonna do them in batches
in
for
order
you
to
because it's too
get
damn
that
hard to
extra
keep up with.
efficiency. And so the Empire troops are all about extra efficiency.
I mean, they did get that sweet art.
Yeah. That's what they're paying their points for. Look at that.
And then we're going to look at the Blizzard Force Stormtrooper Heavy Response unit card really quick.
Same
Again,
idea, right?
Yeah,
Cheaper,
same idea.
yeah.
A little bit cheaper.
I'm,
Their melee attack
I
got
got
degraded
very
a little
fortunate
bit.
and I
The
didn't
white dice
buy
instead of the
the,
black die.
And so now that we've looked at the
Box
baseline
everything
core unit
in
for
mass.
Empire, let's take a look at the Snowtroopers first as their other core option.
So I really like these guys. The
Yeah.
deployment changes have been really interesting to them, and especially the change to
No,
the
not really.
objectives being placed on the center line. They are speed 1 and have steady, but because a lot of the scenarios happen, kind of in that middle line, if you take a full squad with the flamethrower, that's a very good offensive push in and take the points unit that is a lot of fun.
So they can move a little further in round one too.
Yeah.
They can move 2 times, then shoot, which is further than the rest of the core unit. So usually you're getting shots with these guys on round one, which is a big change.
Oh,
And
wait,
talking
they
about their
lost-
upgrade cards, We'll take a look at the Flame Trooper.
Yeah, so some changes here that are also reflected on other weapons of similar types across the game is the flamethrower on the Flame Trooper now is also a melee weapon.
Aha!
And the Ion, the
Sounds
T7
dangerous.
Ion
Ion
rifle
gun is
now
range
no longer
four.
exhausts.
There is
That's kind of a
range
change that we made
three.
across the board for I think most, if not all, the Ion weapons.
It's all, yeah.
Yeah, where they no longer exhaust and they gain critical 1.
And yeah, Ion's a little less punishing now as well.
Ion
So
is
you don't
black
automatically
or
lose an
one
action
light
for
to
each
black,
Ion token.
critical
Instead,
one
you
and
roll
impact
for
one
your
on
Ion
all.
tokens to see if you're going to lose an action whenever you activate. So we were able to make
is
the
a
Ion
print
weapons a lot
play, but
more
I'm sure we're gonna
generalist
get
and
print versions
useful
of these
in more
cards
places by pulling
releases.
that back a little bit.
And then the third core unit, which it kind of fulfills the role of the objective holder, right, are the Shore Troopers as the garrison force. So you can see all the stuff here.
I figured at this point, I'm just gonna. I've got.
Yeah,
all
and much
parts
like
that
the
I
Rebel
wanna
veterans,
do. I'm just gonna do
these
all
units
parts of
are
new
the
stuff.
Shore Troopers are the the defensive archetype
You
for
can deploy before turn
the
1.
Empire, right? They are not very mobile. They've been
dodge.
degraded to speed 1, but they are more about like holding your side of the battlefield and holding your points and kind of interacting via range. So you notice their E-22s have got long shot.
That's a very saucy long shot.
Yes.
you got there.
It is a
Getting
very
range
saucy long shot.
4 on your core troopers means that you can gunline pretty hard with these guys.
Notably, they did lose target, so they have to get that aim token somehow through either one of their own actions or from a friend. And they also gain prepare position
I just keep watching all
to
the Discord
start the
notifications
game on the
flying
battlefield
on my screen.
and
It's
kind of
getting rough.
dictate enemy deployment a little bit, affect that in certain ways.
All right. Well, to be fair, we've talked about a lot of very exciting things.
Wait a minute, we got long
But
shot on
all
the
of it was only
shores.
for one reason, and one
Oh,
reason
yeah.
only. And that was to make the E-Web
Increase range
range
by
for.
Yeah,
1 when
true.
you spend an aim.
You asked, we listened.
E-Web
That's
range
been
4
done.
is a very, very impressive
That's
gun.
been done for
is my-
so
is my
long,
boy
and then all the
actually
chats
worth
are always
something
like,
nowadays?
"You have range 4 win." I'm like, I can't tell them.
Not really.
You cannot.
Can't tell them.
That is one of the things about doing a holistic refresh and doing everything all at once, so it all makes sense with each other.
Range 4,
range-
impact 1,
range
very, very
4.
useful.
Another one that's great
They've
on,
had automatic signal for a while.
that scenario. Oh Lord, I forgot the name of
Intercept
it.
the singles,
bunker
bunker
No,
assault.
the
Breakthrough.
L. The L.
It's good in a lot of
Breakthrough.
scenarios.
It is good in a
It's
lot
good
of
in a lot.
scenarios.
It's good in a
But
lot,
putting it
yeah.
in the center and then just being like, which side are you going to come in on? I'm going to
covering the
shoot you either
objectives,
way. Deal with it. So the E-Web
With
finally
prepared position.
getting the
Yeah.
range it always deserved. And then let's
And
go
it's
into
range
the
4.
Dark.
Yes! Oh, yes!
Which is just an armor thing here.
Dark
Yeah, they've been
Troopers,
reduced to armor 3 from
three
armor
plotting,
So it's still very durable, still very
unconcerned,
strong, but not
unstoppable.
just full armor.
Increases the
E11,
interactivity against
one
them.
black range,
Yeah,
1 to 3,
it doesn't
crushing
necessarily
punch
punish
doesn't
as
change.
heavily if you don't have a lot of impact in your force.
Yeah.
For sure.
I don't see much
And
changes
overall,
in
just
Dark
a
Troopers outside
just a
of
strong
armor
change, I
instead of
think,
just armor.
for
Which
keeping this
actually
unit
tones
close
them
to its
down
original
a lot.
design, but a lot more interesting and fun to play
Very, very
against.
dominant. Yeah.
Um,
Getting to activate twice is a hell of a drug.
Let's. Goodness. All right. Let's take a look at the TX-225 occupier tank. This one has a couple of changes as well.
Ooh,
Yeah, so
Occupier
like
armor
all the other
5.
vehicles, it's gone from
Arsenal 2.
just armor to armor 5. Transport has been slightly reworked.
Reposition.
I think now's a good time to bring up that notch-based movement on
Watkins,
vehicles has
2
been
red,
changed a
2
little
black,
bit,
range 4, no
and that now you get a
surges,
free pivot,
impact
90-degree pivot
Right, at
when
the
you
beginning of
start
your
your
move, you
move
get a free
action.
pivot. So with
Yeah.
reposition, they were able to make
I don't know
2
what
pivots.
changes was really made there outside of it being possibly a little bit.
Yeah, and so it,
Yeah.
it opens up flexibility a little bit. And
So
it makes it
that lets
easier
these
to
longer
move the battlefield.
bases maneuver around. You can maneuver around round buildings. Yeah, I love playing these longer vehicles, and they are much more user friendly now.
Next up,
We have the
we've got
ATST.
TSD. It's got some new awesome art, but the only change here is going to armor 5.
Getting a little cheaper.
No, don't you undersell this art. That is a change.
You know how much I love ATSTs? I made a battle
mean,
force so you could have 3 of them. That's how much I like.
true.
Woo.
That's
Yeah,
true.
we,
Speaking of that battle force,
Speaking of
Major
that battle
Rock
force,
One, also
Segway.
only real change here, armor 5.
yeah, these things
got
are
a
quite
new
efficient for their
marker
shooting
card as
now
well.
with the points decrease.
And last but not least in the Empire, we have the LAT Patrol Transport.
Just changes here to that full armor going to armor 5. Transport was tweaked, and the laser cannon's got a little bit of an offensive boost due to the transport change.
And
Also has
hashtag double ordnance.
double ordnance.
Double missile, double happy.
So you get to fire with your Arsenal 2 every round with the cycling ammunition. It's very, very fun play pattern.
Right.
All right, so we've finished with our look at the rebalances for the Empire. We're going to talk about Now, the Galactic Republic, I think it's really important to discuss that you're going to see quite a few changes here. And just in terms of the approach to the faction, adjusting for fire support and all these other things, making sure that the Galactic Republic had room to be able to expand, to function within the new game system, to not be oppressive, but also to maintain its faction identity in the industry. So one of those big things is that exemplar. You're not going to see that on our next card, which is Padme Amidala. You want to give a quick kind of recap as to how things have adjusted around the fact that this faction really doesn't need exemplar to be able to do what it does, because everyone has exemplar, more or less.
Yeah, pretty much the clone trooper rule has become exemplar.
So yeah,
but the new version of exemplar, right?
Whenever you add tokens to a clone trooper, they can share them at range 2 now. So it's almost like they all have it. Yes.
Yeah. So the leaders, Anakin and Padme, they don't need it anymore. That also does a couple things. One, it lets them be a lot more active in the battle, right? They're no longer hanging out making tokens. They're not doing those kind of things. Anakin has had some significant updates. It's going to make him very exciting, I hope.
Padme moves around a lot with agile and nimble, generating a dodge token and incentivizing you to move basically every round.
So the operatives and the commanders inside of the Galactic Republic are now much more active combatants rather than hanging out, making tokens and supporting the clones. And that let us get the theme of the Galactic Republic being the clones supporting the clones.
And Padme's down to 60 points.
That was really what we were going for with all of these changes, was that the clones are the ones helping each other and not necessarily these things. Now, obviously, like your clone commanders and stuff, they're going to get all sorts of fancy things that are not exemplar because they basically have exemplar. So, yeah. But
let's go ahead and take a look at Diplomatic Cover, which is an updated Padme Amidala command card.
Yeah, so it's still getting granting infiltrate with the divulge, and if you've divulged it, grant secret mission. So she's very good at getting across the table and scoring you that extra victory point now. If you don't need her to stand back and support the clones, right? So she's got a little bit of a split play style that this card kind of describes.
And then probably the most iconic member of the Galactic Republic, Anakin Skywalker, effectively a complete rebuild.
yes.
In almost every way. Just looking at what the character, how the character was, what he needed to do to be useful in the faction to kind of fulfill the Anakin Skywalker dream. A lot of changes here.
So he starts off very aggressive. Starting in round 1, you can immediately start moving him towards the enemy forces to dive in. He's just a maximum aggression Jedi.
I don't think we're going to go through it, but the Tempted keyword is definitely something everybody should go read because it is completely different.
Very
now.
different.
Completely changed. And in addition to being completely changed, his command cards have entirely been updated and rebalanced as well to reflect the Anakin Skywalker as the general of the Republic. So if we want to dive into those. Important to note, there's no flaw card here because he no longer has a flaw card. So that's been completely removed from his overall kit. As we felt like it was more of a negative than a positive in terms of what it was adding to this character and the fantasy of being able to put him in your army and play with him.
So this is where the fun begins.
Yeah, I appreciate the
giving Anakin prepared position, and a free action jump just really gets him across the table. And so slinging him at your enemy is a very good playstyle for him. You underestimate my power, gets some extra hitting power versus already activated units. And General Skywalker gives him and his army aim tokens. So he's just really all about punching you directly in the
He's very
face.
aggressive.
Yeah.
And on the other side of that, the man who taught him everything he clearly didn't learn, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Is very not about punching you in the
definitely
face.
the most offensive, right? He Saresu Mastery gives him rerolls versus on his defense die versus range attacks.
Yeah, so that's been updated. And let's also talk about Deflect here.
Double rainbow.
So Deflect is always active. You don't have to pay you don't have to spend a dodge token for Deflect to be active, and you always have Surge to block. That is makes it so the Jedi can move around quite freely, especially Obi-Wan. And in exchange for being always on, Deflect can only do 1 wound back if he rolls 1 surge. Yeah. Saresu you can also use to reroll on Guardian by paying a dodge token. Yeah.
That's spicy.
He's here for his homies.
All right, so exciting stuff with the characters. Now let's talk about the core options for Galactic Republic. Tony, if you want to come back to us for a second before we jump to the card, so we can kind of set things up for what people are going to see. One of the big things as we were looking at the Galactic Republic, right? We've talked a little bit in other podcasts and interviews about faction identity, the idea that the Galactic Republic is the elite army. They have the best training, they have the best equipment, but they're not very numerous, right? They are specialists and designed to be the best of the best. When looking at the core options between Phase 1 and Phase 2, what we really saw was not a lot of difference, right? And where we went through our different iterations was to say, let's get rid of the idea that Phase 1 and Phase 2 is the difference between a clone. And instead, let's create a clone trooper infantry unit that effectively is the most customizable unit it can be. And this led to a brand new upgrade, which we'll talk about. And you'll see on the card that only the clone trooper infantry units, the clone troopers in general, get to take, or you'll see in the Galactic Republic so far. And this leads to basically a one core choice that is flexible and customizable in a way that allows it to fill all the different roles that you've seen through the other factions. Now, don't despair if you're like, I don't just want to see one clone trooper unit, I want others. If you watch the roadmap tomorrow, we're going to be showing off one of the new core units that's coming to Galactic Republic, and that also adds some exciting options and opportunities to everything. But the overall design goal and where we landed with this change and this rebalance, I think really did hit the idea that the clones can be customized and they are trained enough to fill any battlefield role they need to, and they have access to that equipment to do it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the card. So clone trooper infantry.
They effectively get a lot of the roles that the Phase 2 clones were getting for a slightly cheaper price tag with the removal of fire support. So they're a very efficient core unit for what you get now, which is that Courage 2 and that reliable for token sharing and keeping the whole army going and supporting each other.
Yeah, so once again, the theme is the clones help the clones. So reliable, gives you that surge token.
And you look at that upgrade bar to the left, that is the
That's the
leader,
upgrade.
heavy weapon, personnel, training, gear, and grenade.
You can do it all.
That top one is the new one that we were talking about, which is the leader
squad
upgrade.
leader,
And so let's take a look at what that upgrade kind of looks like with our boy from the 212th, Boyle, or clone medic Tony. Wow, why would you do that to me? Come on, man! Come on! That's just cold-blooded. That's cold-blooded. Jeez, I can make my own mistakes. Thank you. I don't need you to engineer ones for me.
I appreciate you, Tony.
So Boyle is just one example of these leader
squad
upgrades.
leader.
There's a whole bunch of these, right? I mean, I'm not going to list them because I'll get one wrong, and that'll be amazing.
Well, and you can see them in the document here. Once
One
we
example of
finish
a way
chatting.
you can customize a unit is adding Boyle and a clone medic to a unit of clone troopers so that they can guardian for another unit and heal back wounds, so that to be a real defensive powerhouse guardian type unit.
So Tony, show us the next card, please. Thank you. So now is the time. Yes, perfect. Beautiful.
That's the clone medic.
That's the guy. That's the guy. So yeah, between the personnel slot, between the leader slot, and between the heavy weapon slot, you get to pick what kind of weapon you want to be using. You get to pick what kind of personnel you want to be using. Do you want a large squad of clones? Do you want 10 clones in your unit?
Do you want a medic?
Do you want a medic?
Specialist?
Do you want comms? Do you want
And you
these
get
other
the
different
training
specialists?
slot at
right?
56 points, so you
Yep.
get that as well for another level of customization.
And you get an equipment slot, and you can take a grenade slot. We're going to talk about grenades in a little bit, and they're very exciting now. And then you get this leader slot, which is really, the leader slot to me is very exciting because it's usually very powerful, but is kind of on those unique characters. Not all of them, but it is on a lot of the named characters. So
It really adds that personality and that flavor that we've seen over and over throughout the Clone Wars animated series and in all the other media about the clones, who they are, how they function within the Galactic Republic, like armed forces.
This is Boyle's
and
unit
everything
of
else.
clone, or 5's units of
Yep.
leader of
And once
clones.
you put multiples of those on the table, you really start to get that Galactic Republic feel that I think dials into that identity of what they are and what they mean and everything else. And again, all of this allowed the characters to become more characterful, to become less about just being token batteries necessarily for the army, which sometimes they got locked into, and instead to be able to do all the cool things that we see them do on the screen, right? Reliving that fantasy and that epicness that we see in all the media.
Speaking about cool things,
ARC Troopers also got a decent sized update here.
So they got a roll shift to be more aggressive,
Arcs got
closer range unit.
charge.
They lost their
What?
range 3, but they gained charge. So charge plus tactical one is crazy. You get to move twice, then attack with 2 aim tokens.
And how many dice do those hand blasters roll?
So that's two per arc trooper. So rolling 8 dice with 2 aim tokens is a very, very deadly pool.
Yep. And sharpshooter, of course, there as well.
Yeah.
And these guys also have leader slot.
They also got a little less expensive, so you can use them for before they have a counter charge or a charge available. They can move around into position and generate those aim tokens and share them with the army. It's kind of a really fun support role for them.
And Scout 2 really gets them into places that they have no business being round 1.
Yep.
ATRT, nothing too significant here outside of the Armor 2 change.
And those red defense die now.
So
Because that's what clones have.
that's what clones
The
wear.
guy on the top is a clone.
Yes, he is, in clone armor, to be specific. Let's talk about the Saber Tank. The Saber Tank has a couple of different changes that kind of define its role, make it a little more flexible in terms of army construction and everything else.
How everything got
Again,
points
we made
counts
these
or
main
points
battle tanks
drops
hit a
here
little
on
harder.
top
This
of
one gets
going
surge to
1,000.
hit and gets that second ordnance slot so that you can have those more customizable ammo options, get that fun gameplay.
And
Just real quick, we're able. Fire support is still in the game, even though it's not on the clone trooper units, but it does have a different effect. And part of that change is that now we can give certain Republic units surge to hit, surge to crit, where we wouldn't be able to necessarily do that before because of the interaction between fire support and the clone trooper units.
all right, so let's dive into the final look, final faction.
Oh yeah.
Last but certainly not least, the
I mean,
Separatist
I
Alliance.
have a funny feeling that
Card
where I
rebalances. So
thought
we're going to start with the
my army
T-Series
was in
Tactical
good
Droid.
position,
Again, you're going to see that
I'm now
exemplar that's come
behind.
up quite a bit.
Yeah, this is kind of your
And
minimum
I-
commander. He's
I
the
had-
T-Series is a little more expensive because you get the direct
And I
core
had
droid
almost
trooper
maxed for
that
slot
kind of gets
that you
that
would
B1
want to
order
run
chain
for
going.
everything that you would want to run it that way.
And then we'll move on to the upgraded version of the T-Series, the Super Tactical
He
Droid.
gains an eye.
So that
That makes him more tactical
Yeah.
because he can see more.
That's the tactical eye.
That's the super
The
part.
super part.
yeah, it gets you a lot for these 15 points. You get more durability with the red
Strategize,
defense
direct
dice,
AI,
the 5
exemplar,
wounds. You get
override, sharp
it's upgraded to strategize to get dodge and aim tokens, and you get a lot more lethal weapons.
And then, of course, the 2 named Super Tacs.
Yep.
We're going to start with Kraken, who's the punchy fella.
Yeah,
Like all
He's
the,
got a heavy
like the normal one, he gets exemplar.
yeah, and he will wreck you in melee with that overwhelm. Yeah.
We have
So
Col-
he's very, very strong.
Kraken,
combat
range
options.
1 to
We
3,
have Kalani,
3 red, 4 red and melee.
Also the exemplar.
Do we want to talk about
Search
AI and what changes?
I think we're going to
Yes.
talk about AI when we get
Exemplar,
to B1s.
reinforcement,
Ah,
sharp
are they next?
shooting
They are
No.
next.
Oh.
We got a couple
okay.
more characters to go through.
I'll calm
But
down.
you brought it up, so let's talk about AI.
We can talk about it.
What a transition.
Who needs a script when you've got a Pagani just throwing things out and a Tony skipping slides?
AI only triggers. So you have to make a forced action with AI if you're not ordered, or if you're within range 3 of a commander, you can ignore AI as well. So if you're, it gives a lot more flexibility on how you organize your force, and you can still do the order chains and order control. B1s have not been changed, but
Oh, there's a lot more of them now. 112, I believe you said?
112. But
85
they're
points in
using
Kalani.
other options is a lot more, a lot
So
easier
not
now
only do we get
because of the AI change.
a point increase,
Yeah, the
we're
units
getting
with AI
points
are no
drops
longer
on stuff,
punished
too.
as harshly by not receiving orders, which the B1s always kind of got for free.
Right.
Right? Was kind of what we were trying to address with that. So now you're
Yeah.
more incentivized into taking, or
It's
maybe-
easier
maybe
to take
not
other
more
units.
incentivized. It's less disincentivized. That's a word.
Penalized.
Penalized. Disincentivized. For taking those units because of the AI on those units. But it also gives your opponent a great counterplay where they can sort of snipe out or scalpel
Dude,
out these tactical droids and the T-series droids.
let me have
put
my
that AI
remnant
back,
list with
and now
200
your
more
points
points
revert,
in it.
and you get that kind of thing. So
So protecting your
It was
commanders becomes
nasty
really
on its
important,
own, but I can only imagine.
well as opening up some more options for sure. Let's look at the one and only Count Dooku,
who does not have AI?
who does not have AI.
No.
He does not. No, he's a
We only got new
thinking
Dooku
man.
cards, and
Yeah.
we
So
don't know
Dooku
where
got
near
some
as
pretty
good
incredible
as
force lightning here,
his other art.
and native surge to block, so that works in melee as well, which makes him even more dominant versus the
Code,
Jedi that he
deflect,
can fight.
direct trooper, immune
So
pierce,
that
mastery,
it's you can
master
just put this
force
guy
two,
wherever you want, basically,
5
because
red
he's so
melee,
durable.
He's a bully
6
for sure.
black
Right.
slot hit,
So
2.
that's why he didn't get any sort of like
Surge crit, surge
movement rules,
defense.
because he doesn't really need them. He can just stand and take over the area where he's at.
Yeah, he also got that direct trooper unit to kind of give a little bit of
Oh,
the
he
flavor
lo-
of,
he
you know, he
lost,
is, in name at least,
Arsenal too.
the leader of the Separatists. And so, you know, he's very that, like, okay, I'm going to scheme and, like, I'm going to have these plans within plans. But then, you know, when I have to get my hands dirty, I'm more than capable of doing so.
We're going to take a look at General Grievous next, who another one who kind of got a bit of a glow up here.
He got immune to Pierce so that he can fight Jedi without them Pierce without Pierce
Without
just
getting
breaking him.
ruined?
Yeah.
Entourage IG 100. That was my favorite addition to his rule set, because now you get to live that
Grievous got
fantasy if he's
Entourage
always got his little
Magna Guard.
bodyguard with him.
Yeah, and it's a very effective
Jedi
combo.
Hunter,
He
Relentless
is
Scale,
very good
Pierce,
in
and
melee
Lock.
as well with his Magna Guard attendance. So, and
And
losing Arsenal,
he's down to
having his
130
Annihilator move to the
points.
card, having both of his lightsabers move to one profile means we could make them a little better by giving them critical one.
It also simplifies it a bit as well.
Right.
Let's go ahead and take a look at his Supreme Commander command card, which got a little bit of a update.
Yeah, so we wanted to see General Grievous ordering the droids in his army a little more, and this what this does. It allows him to really spread out surge
Oh, and
tokens,
Grievous got his gun
and
as
that
well.
Ruthless makes it so you can move your droid troopers, your core droid troopers, much more. You get an extra action in exchange for one of them getting defeated, which because of their numbers,
There's only 112 of them. Ben.
right, is actually a very, very strong buff. So him being a ruthless general is what we see here.
Let's talk about B1 battle droids, although we've already talked about the AI changes, but here are the B1s.
Yeah. So with their squad upgrade, they made there's no changes to B1 battle droids except that they can, as a personnel slot, get another 7 B1 battle droids for 38 points. And then you add the heavy weapon to that, you get 14. And then Separatist Invasion, you can take 8 units of them for 112.
Look, man, all I'm
total
saying is
B1s.
my snowtroopers eat good against that.
That's
they eat
true.
very good against that.
Those guys super do not want to see a
buying
flamethrower.
I was surprised you didn't get carpal tunnel with how many B1s you were removing from the table. Each activation, it was impressive.
Yeah, we
watching
played
that
it
game.
enough to where we'll see how good it is. It doesn't seem like it's like going to skew out the game as much as we initially predicted. So we went ahead with it.
All right, let's take
I'm
a look
excited.
at the
Yeah.
B2 battle droids who did get a couple changes in the rebalance.
Yeah, so part of reassessing them as their roles at core unit, right? So you've got the B1s, which are kind of your horde. Quantity has a quality of its own. Like, you can't attack maybe all of them or get rid of all of them,
V2s,
but they're not very
2
effective
courage, red
and
defense, AI
individually as
attack,
units.
defense
And
armor.
now you've got the B2s
Okay
where
with
these
this.
guys are more durable. They hit harder. They no longer have armor. Instead, now just have a red defensive
Melee
die.
to 2,
They
2
also
black,
got an upgrade to their arm
wrist
cannons, which are now
rockets,
melee weapons,
impact
and
one
they got
wrist.
the wrist rockets, so that you can yell, "Watch those wrist rockets!"
those
at your
wrist
opponent.
rockets, of
yeah,
course.
and they have a short-range anti-vehicle option. Just kind of give them the role of
With the red defense die, they're
Yeah,
very,
they're
very,
very good
very
at moving
durable,
up
and
and taking
they're very
points.
aggressive to things that are near them. So they can get into aggressive positions and project that short range fire.
And they do have a squad upgrade going to 8.
yes,
Right.
total.
Yes.
They do.
Yeah,
the
for
heavy
add
weapon.
4 plus the heavy weapon gets
Yep,
you to 8.
gets you to 8.
Let's go ahead and take a look at the BX series droid commandos.
These
Yeah.
boys are jumpier now. They got the jump roll, which with
Commandos
their
got
scout
jumps,
moves,
that makes
with the
them
jump
even
roll,
better.
with scale, they're able to move around and get into interesting places on the battlefield
Impervious.
with a kind of flexible AI roll.
Wait a minute. Jump. AI
They're
dodge
able to
movement,
even move
impervious,
away from the
scale,
commander
scout
some,
3, sharpshooter.
and they can
2
get
wide
into
at
those
range
positions that you
3,
really don't
1
want to
wide
get
melee,
a lot of your other
surge
units.
hit.
Or that you can't
Phenomenal
get
in
with
bunker
your
assault.
that you can't get to with maybe your B2s or your B1s, right?
Right.
That jump one opens up a lot of movement flexibility.
Bunker assault
Yeah.
especially,
So
you really get to live that
equipping
Yeah.
with the
narrative
vibro
of them
swords as well is also really cool now.
going in and blowing stuff up. And then last but not least, we're going to look at the AAT battle tank.
Oh, and the tank.
The
AI
AAT
attack,
got
five
a surge to hit.
Yeah, we have one.
barrage, hover green.
Yep.
You can make your own mistakes.
And
Right.
got,
I am a man. I will make my own mistakes. Thank you.
So again, this is
Not
like
health.
the sort of these
Six break.
big battle tanks got a
4 red
little
artillery
more
team,
efficient at putting out their firepower with the circular here.
And double ordnance.
Double ordnance.
This guy already had double ordnance. This is
This is what taught us
is
about
what
double
taught us
ordnance
about
is
the
more
I
fun.
don't care. Double ordnance.
But he does have the
Hashtag.
double ordnance, which I love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He still has it. That's important to note.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't change
Yeah.
because that's the trend. Okay.
Man,
The Persuader, the not
I
last.
feel you. I mean, if I
Well, it's
if
not
I
the last
wasn't
card, but it's
so
the last
heavily
card here. Double
deep in
ordnance
this-
again, Ben.
Yeah,
Just to
I
be
love the
clear.
double ordnance here
Just to
because
be
you
clear.
kind of mix and match. Like the ion cannons are better with some of the ordnance, and the heavy blasters are better with some of the ordnance. So you can kind of like 2 and 2, turn from turn, and just kind of mix and match here. Which is I love the Persuader tank. It is I just love transporting B2s or Magna Guard up the field with it now, and getting those double ordnance slots makes it play very, very fun.
All right, and then the last card that we're going to look at, well, we're done with all the faction updates. We're just going to look at one upgrade card, and this is to kind of discuss grenades in general and to show you the changed impact grenades.
Yeah, so grenades have been changed to it's no longer just a weapon that any miniature in the unit can contribute to the attack pool. Now, one miniature in the unit can add a grenade to the attack pool. And we're showing the impact grenade because it came about because, as we talked about earlier, we wanted players to be able to interact with vehicles more, especially now that one or multiple they can score.
Yeah.
You can have one or maybe more than one vehicle standing on a point, and we wanted players to have an option to dislodge those vehicles, interact with them. So now you have impact grenades. So one miniature in the unit can add the impact grenade to the attack pool to add one black die, and
adds
impact 4
to the whole pool.
Right. Pool. A lot of the grenades also have had their range change from range 1 to also be melee weapons as well. So you can give it a little bit of an offensive boost in melee.
Sounds less than ideal to melee somebody with a grenade.
Oh,
but
versus a tank, it's fine.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
I was gonna say, that's how you use grenades.
You just put it in a
this-
hole, right?
You got
Yeah.
it right there. Pop the hatch, throw it in.
collected.
Done. All done. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our new Battle Order panel. We only went 10 minutes over, so we didn't need the extra 30 minutes they gave us.
Yeah.
Just 10.
They can have
just
20
10.
of it back?
They can have 20 of it back, depending on how long this outro takes. I mean, we could milk
We
it
could
for
go.
all
Could
worth.
go forever.
All it's worth. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We hope you are absolutely as
All right.
excited as we are to
So-
finally get this into your hands, to start playing games with it, to start exploring all of the new opportunities and options that these rebalance cards are bringing, the brand new battle deck is bringing, and of course the new core rules are offering with their changes and updates as well. Again, all of those documents are available right now on atomicmassgames.com. Just click on the Legion section, go to the rules, and you can get all of it.
Read our
and
article
start-
if you want more
start playing.
analysis.
There's
you
also
want-
an article.
There's also an
Highly
article.
suggest the article.
Way more analysis and detail into the thought process behind the change, some of the math, and some of the changes we didn't really even touch on. Go ahead and dive into that as well. It's going to be there for you as well. We can't wait to see how everybody interacts and how this changes all of the games and everything else. Be sure to join us tomorrow for the Legion roadmap, where we'll be showing off all of the new stuff that's coming out over the next 12 months and taking a look at some exciting new things.
I'm just making hand signals.
You're
over
just
here.
doing this? You're just doing
doing
this?
it,
All
doing
right.
the hand thing.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Be sure to tune in next. Dallas Kemp is going to be painting some Legion stuff.
Okay.
Some
So,
terrain, I believe.
Now that
check out
everything's
that.
up, let's pull up our rule books here. Hey, I'm gonna pull up OBS and I'm gonna change out what I've got on screen. Because, properties. There we go. We got the rule book up. All right, let's go through this and see what we got. What our true thoughts on some of this are. Because as it currently stands, effective 7/19/2024. Yep. So that means Oh man, Lone Star Open may run the old rules just because of everything. Okay. You turning into Mr. Roboto on me there. This weekend, like tomorrow. Oh yeah, because nobody knows. Discord. Mm-hmm. Oh man, you got to add the clones Comtech to gain fire support on the on clones, and it costs you 30 points. Uh, okay, so did they go over the advantage? And I'm trying to remember which advantage cards they went over here because I think the rule book spoiled the ones that we didn't get spoiled for us. Which I mean, hell, it's all tomorrow anyway, so it don't matter. Okay, so POI is a 2-inch token used to mark the objective location of a point of interest. Objectives on the battlefield. 1-inch token is used to represent asset objectives. Advantage tokens are also a 1-inch token. There's now I think they're referring to those as command card advantage, or not command card, but like the yay. So I already see things that I don't see much changes in some of this. Oh, for more information on cover, see page 33. Thanks. Yeah, and we've added the squad leader upgrade card. Example of exhaust and expand. Okay, so determining blue player. Each player rolls 5 black attack dice to determine who will start building a mission as blue player. The blue player is the player with the most crit results. If there is a tie, the most hits g- go from there, and if there's still a tie, it surges. Yeah. Now that blue player is determined, it is time to build the mission. Place the game dashboard with the mission side face down, or with the mission side face up near the table. Then each player separates their battle deck by type, advantage, objective, and secondary objective, and shuffles each of their 3 decks, placing them near the mission board. And then you place a token for whoever is blue. The blue player then chooses to reveal the top card of either the objective deck or the secondary objective deck, placing the revealed card in the designated area. The opponent reveals the top card of either their objective deck or secondary objective deck, whichever was not placed, and places it on. And then starting with blue player, players alternate modifying the mission. in the following ways. Reveal the top card of your objective deck. Discard the current card on the objective space of the mission dashboard. After each player has modified the mission twice, the mission is built. Before the first round, the players set up the mission in the following order. Blue player chooses table edge. And then you go objective, secondary objective, and then advantage. Resolve setup effects, deploy in prepared positions, objective tokens, winning the game. Because a lot of that, we're just gotta. If at the end phase of any round, a player has 12 or more victory points and has more VPs than each opponent, they win the game. If at any time only one player has undefeated units, they immediately win. At the end of the fifth round, the player with the most VPs is a winner. If both players have the same, and then it goes by kill points, and then a draw. Oh, fuck. We still ain't got rid of draws. Command phase hasn't changed. Unit cohesion. Each miniature must be at half of its unit leader when measuring cohesion. Range tool may not overlap impassable terrain. Gotta have line of sight to unit leader. And gotta be within vertical. You gotta be 44 millimeters on the battlefield. When an undeployed unit performs a move, it deploys. When a unit deploys this way, measure the start of the move with both prongs of one end of the movement tool touching portion of the edge of the battlefield within friendly territory. When the unit deploys, the unit leader measures the vertical distance change during the move from its. What? When an undeployed unit performs a move, it deploys. Alright, man. Not a problem. Some of this is insane. We're gonna jump. Alright. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna stop all this. I'm gonna read through this rule book, and we'll be back a little bit later.